You're listening to the NFL Draft Bible Podcast Network, part of Sports Illustrated, giving you daily NFL Draft, Dynasty, and Devy Fantasy Football podcasts.
It's football time, and this is the Blitz on Sports Illustrated's NFL Draft Bible Podcast Network. I'm your host, Matt Hicks, joined as always by John Lobb, the Gridiron Scholar, and Skip Newton. Fellas, we are coming off of an absolutely fantastic week one of college football. It should be a pretty interesting week two. We're going to talk about it. It's a pretty quirky slate, so we're going to get into it. Definitely want to help out our listeners as much as possible. In this week's episode, we're doing news and notes, marvelous matchups, CFF Sleepers, DFS analysis, and you want to make sure to hang on to the end for our best bets because, gentlemen, we did pretty well here in week one. How are we doing tonight, fellas?
I'm doing great. I was lucky enough to get one share of Kenneth Walker on my 8 teams. So I'm ecstatic that I got him. You know, he went from 20% owned to 87% owned on Fantrax, which tells you how active and how vibrant the new college fantasy football community was. Because 7 years ago, that was not happening.
Yeah, it's really picked up. I mean, he's one of those guys that I'm going to talk a little bit more about later, but it was an awesome group of a weekend of games last week, and I'm excited for this weekend. I'm still watching, games that I missed. I got them all recorded on the DVR, so just kind of going through it as I'm working. I have a game on in the background, and I'm thrilled. I'm a little confused. We didn't have a game. We don't have a game tonight. We don't have a game tomorrow night. I thought there was supposed to be college football every night, Matt. That's what you promised last week.
You know what, Skip? Now we have to do this NFL thing. I don't know what this NFL is, but I guess that has some nights now. I don't know, man.
It's crazy.
Hey, just listen, we're not that far from action, baby. What is Matt? We got Wednesday nights. Sometimes they give us Tuesday nights, right? So We'll get there.
They're probably like 3 weeks away. I haven't exactly looked at that, but yeah, it should be about 3 weeks.
I can't wait for the action, baby. Well, gentlemen, you know our goal. We're getting all of this info jam-packed here into about 30, 35 minutes for our listeners. So let's go ahead and jump right into the news and notes. And we got to start off on a sour note, some really rough injuries here to kick off the beginning of the season. Most disappointingly, in my personal opinion, Minnesota redshirt junior running back Mo Ibrahim is confirmed out for the remainder of the season. He looked absolutely phenomenal to start. It's super disappointing. Also, a big player in Michigan's offense is out for the season. Wide receiver Ronnie Bell with a right knee injury has been ruled out for the remainder of the season. Gentlemen, probably for the relief of Stanford fans, they have picked a quarterback, and it looks like they're going to go with quarterback Tanner McKee over Jack West. They tried to play both of them last week. It did not look good. There was no rhythm. There was no tempo. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the USC Stanford, I'm sure, later on in this episode. South Carolina quarterback Luke Doughty is apparently close to returning. It looks like he may be back for this weekend's game. I don't know if the Gamecocks need him this weekend. It looked like their graduate student coach turned Jackie Moon quarterback did all right for him last week, but I think we're going to see Luke Doughty back on the field either this weekend or the following one. After Clemson, Georgia this past weekend, it came out that redshirt freshman wide receiver EJ Williams had a thumb injury, but it looks like he's going to try to play through it this season. That's what Dabo Swinney and Williams have come out and said. We'll be definitely following that this season. Redshirt sophomore quarterback Steven Krajewski was named the starter for UConn here after Randy Edsall left the program after a stunning defeat to FCS Holy Cross here. But it looks like we might have some momentum looking forward, and we'll talk about UConn Purdue definitely later on this episode. USF has named quarterback Cade Fortin to be the starter moving forward for the team. They take on University of Florida this week. That'll be a sneaky matchup for DFS purposes, and we'll talk more about that later. Arizona head coach Jed Fish said on Monday that he hopes to have redshirt sophomore wide receiver Jamar Joyner back for Saturday's game. Fellas, Jamar Joyner was a wide receiver I was very excited to see. In week 1, it came out with the injury, so we're going to have to wait a little bit. But I'm excited to see Joyner back on the field. I think he might be their most talented member of their offense right now. Oregon freshman wide receiver Troy Franklin, who was named the top of the depth chart, and then all of a sudden he had an undisclosed injury. He didn't play last week. He didn't get the action we thought he was going to do. So now it looks like for Ohio State, he will be back in the action, back in the main rotation. We'll see about that. And gentlemen, we'll see about this one. I don't believe him for a damn second because he's already lost my trust with Chase Brown. But apparently Illinois sophomore running back Chase Brown will be good to go this week for Illinois. Yet to be determined. I'm still not playing him with confidence. I don't trust that coaching staff anymore. Washington State head coach Nick Rolovich said on Monday that he's leaning towards starting freshman Jaden DeLora on Saturday, which really the fact that Jaden DeLora did not win out that job week 1 is incredibly disappointing to Jarrett Garantano. Remember the Tennessee transfer. And so for the sake of Washington State, I'm hoping Jaden DeLora can win out that job. UTEP redshirt freshman Deion Hankins will not play again on Friday's game against Boise State. That's disappointing. Definitely somebody who's on CFF radars. Wisconsin redshirt freshman running back Jalen Berger is listed as a co-backup with junior Isaiah Garanado. It looks like Ches Malusi has won that starting job, which is very disappointing. We will certainly break that down here in the Devi seminar this week. And last note here, it's Oregon State head coach Jonathan Smith said on Monday that the starting quarterback for Saturday's game against Hawaii will not be announced until later this week. So we're going to fade Oregon State offense, I think, this week for the most part in college football. Gentlemen, what I miss? What are the biggest reaction points?
I'll let Skip begin with the topic of the week, who crushed one of my best ball teams. And what I took him in the first round in a league last week. So, Skip, start off with Mohamed Ibrahim. What is Minnesota going to do?
Man, that was so disappointing. You know, the game was actually going really well for Minnesota. It was one of those things where as a Gophers fan, I tell myself going into games like this, just get to the end of the third quarter, fourth quarter-ish, and let me be able to say we have a chance. Like, I don't need to have delusions of grandeur and we're going to pull off the big upset, but at least make it possible and don't make it a blowout. And that's exactly what they were doing. It felt like they had momentum. And then we see Ibrahim go down, and that replay, guys, I think everybody that I was hanging out with, and I'm sure everyone across the United States that saw that, as soon as he planted that right foot and you saw the pop, everyone just went, ooh, and you knew it just wasn't good. And it's really unfortunate, obviously, for him, but for the team as well. I mean, they were really riding him. He's such a focal point of the offense. They don't have another running back that's going to fill that void completely. I think it's going to be more of a running back by committee. Potts looks a little more dynamic, like in the outside and in open space. He's more of a, I'm going to make you kind of miss guy, but he's not that power inside runner that Ibrahim is and that Minnesota relies on. So that's a huge loss. I'm not expecting much from Kai Thomas, but I think he's going to get a little more carries, but it'll be interesting to see how they respond. It might be that they have to pass the ball more than they initially intended. And fortunately in that regard, transfer Dylan Wright from Texas A&M had a very good game. Mm-hmm. And if they can get Chris Ottman-Bell back, they've got Daniel Jackson. Those are three, I think, pretty good wide receivers that, maybe could help make up for the loss of Ibrahim.
Skip, if you were a CFF owner, and you are, but if you had Ibrahim and you wanted a Minnesota running back, are you taking one or prioritizing one over the other? Are you going to let this develop? What would you do if you can't get any of the big backs on a waiver wire, or you're looking for anything in that backfield?
It's a great question. I do have him in one league, and I didn't choose to use a claim yet on his replacement. I think Potts is the guy that I have my eye on. Obviously, if you pick him up now, he's going to be probably at his cheapest, because if he comes out and has a great couple of games in their non-conference schedule, then his value is going to go way up. But my my instincts tell me let's look at, maybe some of those other running backs that have been sitting out there. We'll talk about one you already mentioned, Walker, that absolutely shot up on ownership. So guys like that, but I'm taking a wait and see approach.
That's perfectly understandable. I did too. I didn't pick up a Minnesota running back, but you have much more insight than I do.
And before we move on to marvelous matchups, I just need to mention that Kenneth Walker was absolutely robbed for Offensive Player of the Week. They gave it to Bijan Robinson, who played well, but he didn't score 4 touchdowns.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen, let's transition here to our marvelous matchups. Remember, these are the highest over-under totals of the week with contests that have a point difference less than 10 points. So we're not trying to have our blowout games, but what we're trying to do is show you the highest implied scoring games so you could try to get a piece of CFF action this week. And it starts here with a game I am oddly excited about. I got to be honest here, fellas. I love the ponies. And SMU is hosting North Texas with an over-under of 73. I mean, John, I'm going to let you dig into it a little bit, but Tanner Mordecai, Reggie Roberson, right? This is full go with the ponies.
I'm more than a little excited, Matt. I've come to love these types of games. Look, the spread is 22, so I had a big decision, but it's 73 total points, and there's really no other game that's close this week. So I decided, let's put it up and talk about it. I did some research here. North Texas, they beat Northwestern State 44-14. Clobbered them last week, FCF school. But here's what happened that was interesting. The Eagles ran for 345 yards on the ground. What's more interesting is the Ponies surrendered 171 yards last week in their loss. So what I like is I do believe that the Eagles are going to run this football. And I think DeAndre Torrey, who is now on 60% of teams, he's the running back you want in a flex position in this game. He should stay active and he should stay alive for you in college fantasy football. Now, the SMU side, they killed Abilene Christian 56-9. The story, Tanner Mordecai, right, everyone? I lost 2 games to Tanner Mordecai. My opponent played Tanner Mordecai. I'm mortified by this still. But he had 7 touchdown passes, 317 yards. Matt referred to the receivers. Reggie Roberson is 96% of teams. You can't give up on him yet. I still think you put him in the lineup. But Danny Gray, after the waiver wire, is available on 68% of teams. Rashid Rice is available on 66% of waiver wires. And Grant Calcaterra is available on 60% of the waiver wires. He scored twice. So you can dip into that wide receiver core for SMU. Definitely play Roberson, everyone, even though you're disappointed. But you can pick up the other 3 and put them in your lineup.
All right, and I should mention it's a 22-point. North Texas is getting 22 points in that game, so we're looking at SMU pretty hard. But overall, it should be a pretty high-scoring attack. Next up here, a group of 5 battle between Memphis and Arkansas State. Gentlemen, there's 3 things that are certain in life. Death, taxes, and one freaking Arkansas State wide receiver putting up stupid numbers, all right? Those are the things that we know are certain in life. And this year, the new inheritance of this is Corey Rucker. Y'all, week 1, 9 receptions, 138 yards, and 3 touchdowns. It's a position that they highlight here, and Arkansas State, I think, is just going to be absolutely feeding Corey Rucker again. They used 2 quarterbacks last week, and I believe, if I remember correctly, didn't they use a 2-quarterback rotation last year as well between these 2 guys?
They did. This is a nightmare.
Yeah.
You're like, well, you just play Lane Hatcher. He's good. Just play.
He went 12 for 12, 150 yards, 4 touchdowns. You think they would play the guy? But, that's what I'm locked in on for for the Arkansas State side. And looking on the Memphis side here, somebody who honestly was not too much on my radar before last week, but Brandon Thomas had a great game week 1, 16 carries, 147 yards, and a touchdown. John, I'm interested to get your perspective on the tight end there. I'm losing his name, Dykes, who kind of got blanked last week, but that's kind of what I'm locked in on here. If you want to look at quarterback, Hennigan will be the quarterback again. It looks like Grant Gunnell is out for the first couple weeks, so you could go down that route, but I think it's probably Thomas here is what I'm focused on.
I agree with Thomas. He outsnapped Rodriguez-Clark 35-21. And all summer, I was looking for insight into this Memphis running game. I mean, we've had Darrell Henderson, Tony Pollard, who's the other great Antonio Gibson. We've had great running backs. We didn't have a lot of clarity this summer, but we got it. You can't hide the actual what you see on the field. Brandon Thomas was owned on less than 15% of teams. Go pick him up, ladies and gentlemen. If he's the starter, the Tigers score points in the backfield. And play Sean Dykes one more week. You got to assume it. They blew him out. They just didn't go to him. You don't give up on a top 10 tight end after 1 week.
All right, and that over-under for Memphis, Arkansas State is 65. Memphis laying 5 points. Skip, you're going to break down the game of the week. Oregon at Ohio State, over-under 63.5. Ohio State, the Buckeyes, are laying 14 on this game. And I got to tell you, this is the one that I am locked in on.
Yeah, this should be a really good game. Hopefully Oregon can keep it close and make things really interesting. They did win 31-24 last week. Their quarterback, Anthony Brown, I've got kind of a B grade on him. He does have limited passing upside. He only threw for 172 yards last week. That said, he also ran the ball 16 times for 56 yards and a touchdown, and they were just running the ball really well. They ran the ball a total of 49 times. So they might be forced to pass the ball against Ohio State if Ohio State gets up, which wouldn't be a surprise given the point spread there. The wide receivers, a little more tough to predict. Again, the limited volume last week makes them maybe C grades. Micah Pittman, Johnny Johnson are the two guys. We need to see more volume for them to look better. And then, of course, we already talked about true freshman Troy Franklin. It's risky to start a guy coming off an injury, true freshman. We don't know what he's going to do. That said, if he's a starter and it's, again, the passing volume increases if they're down, that's intriguing. But boy, I think I wait and see on him. CJ Verdell, the running back, I'm giving him a B grade. He has explosive potential. He can put up big numbers. He's shown that in the past. He's also shown us that he can put up duds. So is it going to be a dud game? Is it going to be one of his big games? He had actually a middle road game last week, which is surprising, 74 yards and a touchdown. But I do like him over Travis Dye, who had 64 yards and a score last week. So I think my money would be on Verdell at running back. We already saw what Ibrahim did a week ago against these same Buckeyes. So, well, I don't like him as much as Ibrahim. I do like him as a starting running back for sure. On the Ohio State side, there's a lot to love. Of course, they're coming off that 45-31 win. CJ Stroud looked awful, looked like a guy that had never played a game in the first half, came around in the second half, made some big throws. He had wide receivers open all over the place, which definitely helped. But I think in this high-flying offense, regardless of how good he's looking, and you might question whether or not he's going to keep the job long-term, especially with the depth, you got to play him. He's an A grade. So he's a must-start with all these weapons. A grades for Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, the dynamic duo at wide receiver. Both of these are potential first-round picks next year. I love Olave. Should be playing on Sunday. Same with Wilson. They are the best 1-2 punch at wide receiver in football, so you're never benching them. Still going to give a C grade on Jackson Smith-Jigba. I think with more volume, he's the guy. He's the third guy you want. So I'm not giving up on him. I can't. Running back, Mine Williams led the team last week. He led the team in yards. He scored a touchdown. We're not sure how long he's going to be the man there because it's only a matter of time before freshman sensation Travion Henderson takes over. This kid looked all about his high rating and everyone being excited about him. He was the number one running back of the freshman class, and he looked the part. He is absolutely explosive, scoring on that long pass. I think it's only a matter of time before he takes over, but I feel like you can play him now. The guy that I feel is going to be left out is Master Teague. I'm not sure how you can start him and feel good about it, given that everyone else is looking so much better. And just, I think he's the odd man out. And I have to be desperate to play him.
All right. I think that's really good insight, Skip. I like your CJ Stroud comment. It mirrors, or I should say reinforces, exactly what we were talking about. Arkansas State wide receivers, right? The Memphis running back, the Ohio State quarterback. If you're new to college fantasy football, you have to understand the schemes and the positions that return value. And that's something we try to drive home a lot. And it's really ringing true here through week 1 and into week 2 of the college football season. All right, next game up here. We're going out west. It's Hawaii at Oregon State, 61.5. Man, Oregon State can't help themselves but keep getting in our marvelous matchups lineup here. They were in week 1, and they're back in week 2 here. The over-under is 61.5, and Oregon State here is laying 11. John, break this game down for us.
We talked about Oregon State last week, and they ended up losing to Purdue 30-21. You mentioned the quarterback. I'm not going near the Oregon State quarterback position. The only running back that might be interesting, and he's just on my watch list, B.J. Baylor scored twice, but he only had 24 yards rushing. So you're not really excited unless he could bust out a 100-yard game or at least an 80-yard game. The wide receiver, Trayvon Bradford, had 5 receptions for 75 yards. Someone, again, you should watch him. I don't have him on a team, but I do have a watch list. They have a watch list on Fantrax. I put players in that watch list so that I see how they do the next week. Both of those players are watch list players despite the high over-under. And that game's actually at 64 now. On Monday, it was 60. Yeah, the people think the game is going over, which is incredibly strange. And then Hawaii. We now know UCLA is damn good. So their loss now doesn't look as bad as I thought, 44-10, because I thought UCLA killed LSU. They beat them bad. Then they went out and killed Portland State, the Rainbows, 49-35. At the end of the day, the Rainbows have, in 2 games, have 274 passing yards per game, 147 rushing yards per game, 29.5 points per game. We know the stars, the quarterback, Chevin Cordero, Calvin Turner, the running back. We know Jared Smart. The wide receiver you might want, Nick Mardner. Last week against Portland State, 4 for 97 and a touchdown. He had a bad game against UCLA. For the season, he's 7 for 132 and 1. Put Nick Mardner on your watch list, folks.
All right, our last marvelous matchup here, Liberty at Troy, the game of the week. I'm sure everyone is locked in on Liberty at Troy, but there's definitely some important CFF value in it. Over-under is 61. Liberty's just laying 4 here. What do you got, Skip?
Well, both these teams are coming off convincing wins from last week. Liberty won 48-7. Of course, the guy to own here in college fantasy is Malik Willis, their quarterback. He is that Konami code guy that you like to use that expression. He's an A grade. He's a stud. You never bench him. He only completed 15 passes last week, but he still got 217 yards and a touchdown. That's not what makes him so exciting. It's the fact that he could go off for 100 yards rushing at any given moment. He only had 5 carries for 55 yards and a score last week. That's right. I said 55. Only 55 yards and a score. You never bench Willis. He's so good and so dynamic, and that rushing upside makes him a stud and keep him in your lineup. Wide receivers, a little more difficult to predict. Demario Douglas was the key target last week. 7 catches for 84 yards and a score. He seems to be the number 1 guy, so I think you can put him in your lineup with confidence. The next guy I've got is DJ Stubbs. He's definitely a lower grade, maybe a C grade if you're desperate. He only had 3 for 68 yards. So good yardage, a lot of big plays there, but not a lot of volume. So you got to be a little bit more careful. The guy that did have decent volume is running back Joshua Mack. He had 19 carries, unfortunately only averaged 3.2 yards. So you definitely want to see that efficiency go up. He was able to get a score, so that's a good thing. But Malik Willis is the guy to own at Liberty. You always play him. At Troy, another team coming off a big win, 55-3. And this was one of those deals where everybody got involved. So quarterback Taylor Powell, 234 yards, 3 touchdowns. One of those was rushing. He does not have a rushing floor. It was a 1-yard carry, and that was it. So don't think that he's got the rushing upside, but decent passing numbers. He's kind of a C grade. You probably have better options. Wide receiver, couple of these guys, Tez Johnson and Luke Whittemore, both decent, 5 for 92 and 1 for Tez Johnson, 3 for 52 for Luke. So these could be your best wide receiver options. Running back, well, you talk about a running back by committee. I mean, all these guys got involved. Kamani Vidal, B grade. He had 81 yards, touchdown. However, it looks like a 3-way committee with BJ Smith, a C grade on him, 54 yards, a touchdown. He did catch a ball for 10 yards. And Jamontez Wood, giving him a bench grade just because I don't think he's going to get enough volume, but he had 28 yards with a score as well and 2 catches for 27 yards. So they really spread it around. It makes it tougher to predict, but boy, with this over under, and it's supposed to be a close game, you want to have a piece of that. It's just harder to predict which guys to focus on, especially on the Troy side.
All right, time to pivot into our CFF Sleepers of the week. So in this segment, we will each highlight a quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and flex, helping to identify players who might outperform expectations specifically for this week. John, give us your fantastic 4 sleepers for week 2 of the college football season.
I'm going to begin at Mississippi State against North Carolina State. I cannot believe Will Rogers, a Mike Leach quarterback, is only owned on 27% of the teams. I mean, if he's out there and you need a 3rd or 4th quarterback, the upside is incredible. He had nearly 30 fantasy points last week with 370 yards passing and 3 touchdowns. And they were trailing Louisiana Tech by 20 points to kick off the 4th quarter, and he led them from behind to win the game 35-34. I watched that entire 4th quarter. Great football. Running back, Isaiah Bowser. I was concerned and had trepidation about Gus Malzahn. I was a little worried. UCF proved me wrong. What a great football game against Boise State. Dylan Gabriel came through. Jalen Robinson came through. But the guy that was stunning, Isaiah Bowser, played at Northwestern. I'm sure Skip remembers him from 2018. He had a very good freshman year. Then he fell off the radar at Northwestern. Enters a transfer portal. What's impressive? Malzahn gave him 33 carries, and he ended up with 4 receptions for 29 yards. He had 177 yards rushing. Love him, the UCF running back. We talked about earlier, my man Danny Gray, 32% owned, 4 for 72 with 2 touchdowns. Go get him, because here's the story. He's going to beat you if you don't take him right now off the waiver wire, because someone else is going to beat you with him later in the season. And one of my favorite quarterbacks, Chris Reynolds of Charlotte. Ladies and gentlemen, he's a dual threat quarterback. I loved him a ton last summer. He had a really good 2019, but Charlotte they had games canceled, postponed. It did not work out for the 49ers. He had 324 yards passing, 37 yards rushing, 4 total touchdowns, and the 49ers won their first game against the Power 5 opponent, Duke, ever. That was a great game on Friday night, ladies and gentlemen.
In Club Lit. Yeah, that was a great environment.
Yes, and check out these next 3 games. Gardner-Webber, Georgia State, and Middle Tennessee. Yum, yum. Give me Chris Reynolds. And ladies and gentlemen, look at Charlotte's schedule. It's nearly as bad and as easy as Liberty's.
And that is saying something. All right, we'll jump into my fantastic 4 here, CFF Sleepers of the Week. I'm starting at the quarterback position. It's Frank Harris. I think he's still flying a little bit under the radar here. I really like the UTSA matchup this week. I think they could really expose their opponent. Listen, their first game of the season, they go up against Power 5 Illinois. Remember, this is the Illinois team that made Nebraska look bad in week 1. And Frank Harris comes out, goes 20 for 32, 280 yards, a touchdown through the air, no interceptions, and then another 8 for 33 and 1 on the ground. So he puts up a great stat line against an Illinois team that wants to slow the game down and keep it as slow as possible in defensive focus. So I am ready for him to explode here against non-Power 5 competition. Yeah. I am very in on Frank Harris this week.
Matt, he's only on 18% of rosters.
That's irresponsible. That's just irresponsible here. All right, looking ahead here, I'm interested in this one. Honestly, I had to dig for this one, but I think this is a good sleeper. Christian Beal-Smith for Wake Forest, taking over the running back position. Now, there was a decent split in carries. Ellison and Turner got touches as well. But Christian Beal-Smith did the most with his opportunity. 11 carries for 74 yards and 2 touchdowns. Wake Forest this week, we get Norfolk State. All right, that's absolutely a team that not only can Wake Forest take advantage of, find the end zone, but I think it'll quickly turn into a run script game. I think there will be touches to go around here for Christian Beal-Smith. So I'm in on him as a sleeper this week. How about Penn State? Listen, Penn State, we give them a lot of crap, and we give Sean Clifford a lot of crap. And that offense looked bad, especially in the first half last week. But they made some adjustments in the second half. They opened up the field a little bit. We saw a little bit more of this hype that came with Mike Gersich, right? And being an offensive-minded guy. And remember, Wisconsin is one of the best defenses in the country year in and year out. So I think Penn State is pent up. They want to throw the ball. They didn't have the ability to do it last week. But now they're going up against Ball State. And, gentlemen, I think they're going to hang 45-50 on these guys because I think Gersich wants to let it ride. I think Sean Clifford wants to let it ride. And I think they want to start taking advantage of these wide receivers. So I have Keandre Lambert-Smith as my sleeper of the week. I think you're fine with whatever route you want to go down. You know, obviously you're playing Dotson. You can play Parker Washington. But I'm going to go with Lambert-Smith because I think he's just the guy that kind of gets left out of that conversation. We focus so much on the others. But if you look at last week, Lambert-Smith had 4 receptions, which matched Parker Washington, just 1 less than Jahan Dotson. And Lambert-Smith had 71 yards. Did not find the end zone, but literally only Dotson did and Kane last week. So I'm interested in Lambert-Smith. And then I'm going to go to Purdue here for my flex spot. If you look at Xander Hovarth, which, by the way, is one of the best names in college football, 21 carries for 81 yards and a touchdown against Oregon State. Remember, Oregon State made it close here, but Purdue is not going to be in a close battle with UConn this week. They pulled the Huskies, all right? So I think Xander Hovarth is going to get probably closer to 25 to 30 carries. He may only play 3 quarters. But I imagine that by the time he's done with those 3 quarters, he's probably found the end zone twice this week. So I am going all in on Xander Horvath this week as well. And Skip, let's go ahead and dig into your Fantastic Four CFF Sleepers for week 2.
Yeah, I was focusing on guys that I wanted to recommend as waiver wire pickups. And I promise you, if you're listening to this now, these guys were all less than 50% owned across Fantrax leagues when I put this list together. If you're doing your jobs out there as fantasy managers, that's probably still not the case. Definitely about the second guy I'm going to talk about. But just wanted to mention that going off the bat. The first one is quarterback Michael Pratt from Tulane. This kid is gutty. This kid is good. I love watching this kid play. He had almost 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, ran for another 34 yards in a score. He kept getting hammered and kept getting up and playing. I think he's a guy that should be on every team. I liked him in the offseason. I didn't get him in enough leagues, but I've got him in a couple, and I'm kind of kicking myself for not picking him up in more C2C leagues. He looks every bit the part. I think he's legit, and I really like Michael Pratt. The next guy we already mentioned, and like John said, his ownership across Fantrax skyrocketed from 20 to 80%. Kenneth Walker III, Michigan State. Not sure what more he needs to do. 284 yards, 4 touchdowns. He looked explosive. Grab him, play him. He looks like he's probably going to be an every week starter. Wide receiver Jamison Williams, the Ohio State transfer to Alabama. looked as fast as advertised. He is explosive. He appears to be one of the main guys in the Alabama attack. And if we've learned anything these last few years, you want a wide receiver on Alabama because they do nothing but produce. So pick up Jameson Williams. I don't think this is just a 1 week thing for him. I think he's going to be making big plays all season long because that offense produces big plays. And the last guy, this one's for you, Matt, my flex wide receiver, Raheem Jarrett from Maryland. I think that offense is going to be absolutely explosive this season.
Heck
We
yeah.
saw it last week. He was second on the team in yards with 122. So Dante Demas Jr. was first at 133, but they both got 6 catches. They both scored a touchdown. I love Raheem Jarrett. He was highly touted as a freshman last season. If he's somehow available in your league still, as apparently he is, and over 50% when I looked, grab him now. This kid not only is going to be good in college, but he has a very good chance to be good in the NFL.
Yeah, Maryland pulls Howard this week, so absolutely a stage to shine on. And Talia Tagovailoa, also check your waiver wire for him on the Maryland front. All right, gentlemen, I mentioned earlier it's a quirky slate, and I got to tell you, it certainly was, but we are ready to dig into our All-American Bets here, Week 2 edition. Before we do that, just a little bit of a recap here. John, on his picks this season with Week 0 and Week 1, is 6-0, so he is absolutely smashing. I am at 9-6. Skip is at 1-1-1. Gentlemen, I had a great first week on Tally Site, which is a site that we use to track expert picks against everybody else. 15th out of 135 experts in Week 1, 65% accuracy. So let's hope we can keep that momentum going. John, I'm going to let you run through your picks here for. Let's go across with the point spread here. John, what's your point spread pick?
Iowa plus 4.5.
I love that
What I
pick.
saw was a dominant defense. What I saw was a disappointing Cyclones team. I'm going to bet on the defense, the physicality of the Hawkeyes, and that offensive line is going to control the ball with Goodson and the run game. I love the Hawkeyes in this. Take the 4.5.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I almost put Iowa for my point spread, but I saw that Skip already had Iowa for a different pick, so I was like, I gotta pivot off that game. But I think that's a great pick, John. I'm going Purdue, giving 27.5 to UConn. Listen, I'm not trying to beat up on the Huskies here, but they got blanked by Fresno State. I think Purdue can blank them as well. Now the question is, can Purdue score 27 points? But they put up 31 last week, so I think they'll get it done.
I'm going to that game. I can't wait to see David Bell live.
Oh, yeah, John, that's a dream come true. We got to get you an autograph.
I'm so fired up.
All right, Skip, point spread bet.
I'm looking for Miami, Florida to bounce back from getting trounced by Alabama. They play Appalachian State. They're giving the 9 points. I like that. I think they can cover. I know they're at home as well, so this one feels good. I feel better about this one than I did last week with the one I got wrong when I said Clemson -3. So Miami -9. Take that one to the bank.
It never feels bad betting against Chase Bryce. Let's put it that way. All right, John, over-under pick for this week.
This is my favorite group of 5 game. Memphis versus Arkansas. Look at Arkansas. Just play Lane Hatcher, please. They might score 50 points on their own. Memphis is going to score in this game. They can run the football. I'm going over 65. The Tigers and the Red Wolves.
All right, I'm making an interesting pick here. I can tell you it is not the popular pick, but I'm going to the Washington-Michigan game, and I'm going to go under 51.5. Now, gentlemen, I need to preface this by pointing out that 70s on the over/under, 93% of the bets and 99% of the money that I'm looking here on the site that I use is on the over. So I am going against consensus with this pick. But here's my rationale here. I think Washington wants defense to be its identity. I think they're going to try to control the game, slow down the game. Michigan just lost their biggest wide receiver playmaker, so I think they're going to run it through their rotation of running backs. And I know that McNamara looked good last week, but that's Western Michigan. I think he could struggle against the Huskies here. So I think this ends up being a good game, but I think it ends up being under 51.5. All right, Skip, we'll pass it to you here for thanks, John. Yeah, that's good because John
I love it. I love going against the grain like that.
We're going
I'm
for
betting. Yeah, I'm betting on the defensive identity as well. And then when you think about defensive identity, that's Wisconsin. It was a massive defensive struggle last week against Penn State in their close loss. I think they're going to bounce back and win the game, but I think their defense is going to absolutely dominate, and that will keep the score low enough to stay under 52 points.
I like it, Skip. Fellas, let's bring it home with the money line here. John, you're up first.
I cannot believe that the Cougars are underdogs at home against the Utes. Their offense isn't as good as last year. That's obviously when you lose the second pick in the NFL draft in Zach Wilson. But the defense is still good for the Cougars. I'm getting plus 220 on the money line. Give me BYU, baby, all weekend long.
I like it. Listen, I went out early and I said that NC State was a better team than folks thought this year. They looked dang good in week 1 against USF, and I'm riding these guys all the way through here. The money line is minus 136 NC State against Mississippi State. Mississippi State struggled. It looked like they were going to get upset there in week 1. And I think NC State, again, we're going back to the defense. It seems like defense is winning out early here in this college football season. I think they're going to disrupt what Mississippi State wants to do. I think they're going to slow down the game. And I think Zonovan Knight is going to continue running through folks. Devin Leary looked solid last week. So I'm going money line here, minus 136 NC State. Skip, bring us home.
As a Gopher fan, this pains me to say, but I got to put my money on the Iowa Hawkeyes, plus 165 on the money line at Iowa State. It's gross to bet on Iowa as a Gopher fan, but I think their defense is legit, and I think they can go down there and pull off the slight upset and win that game outright.
All right, fellas. All right, so we're going to go through here and finish up this week's episode with our DFS lineups. I put together a full DraftKings Saturday slate, so we're playing on the main slate, 12 games. I need to preface this by saying this is a gross week right now for DFS. So I'm just putting that out here. I struggled a little bit putting together this lineup. This is going to be a DFS week where I'm piecing it together probably still Saturday morning, trying to figure out exactly what I want to play. But here on Wednesday evening when we're recording, I'm going to start off here with my quarterback spot, CJ Stroud, 8,600. I think we got to pay up for CJ Stroud. We talked about it earlier, one of the highest scoring games of the week. And it did not matter that he struggled early. He still looked good. So you can't ignore Oregon defense, but the quarterbacks on main slate this week are not super fun. So I'm going to go CJ Stroud. I'm going to pay down at running back for TreVeyon Henderson, 4,300. Here's my rationale here. TreVeyon Henderson in week 1 touched the ball 3 times. He found the end zone, and he returned value on his price tag. So at 4,300, you need to find some savings on the slate this week. And I'm going to take somebody who I feel fairly confident that he's going to at least give me a solid return here, even if he touches the ball only 5 times. And I think he'll probably touch the ball closer to 10 times this week. Running back Zamir White. Georgia is up against UAB. This is my locked and loaded pick. I want Zamir White against UAB because I think Georgia is going to want to open up their offense in a similar way. They sold us, right? They sold us this offseason on this more innovative, high-flying offense. And then, obviously, week 1 against Clemson isn't the time to show it off. But week 2 against Alabama, Birmingham, that is the time to show it off. And it's going to start.
JT Daniels just came up on the injury report.
Okay, so we're running it through Zamir White especially then. Double down on that breaking news. Fellas, I talked about Lambert Smith and the CFF Sleepers, 3,900. You really can take your pick of Penn State wide receivers because I believe Parker Washington was similarly priced, maybe if I'm remembering correctly, in the mid-4s. I think you could stack Lambert Smith, Parker Washington. I probably will do that in a couple spots. Now, play Sean Clifford at your own risk. I'm not going down that far in the stack. Michael Mayer, the tight end here, I mean, that Notre Dame offense ran through Michael Mayer. There's no doubt about it. I'm willing to roll him in there. I know they have a smaller opponent. I believe it's Ball State, if I'm remembering correctly. I'm willing to put him in and let the offense and targets flow through him. I'm going to stack C.J. Stroud with Chris Olave. That's my wide receiver of choice. I believe Garrett Wilson is priced lower, but I'm always going to pay up for Olave. We're talking about the Georgia offense. Bowers, the tight end, led the team in targets last week. He's only 3,600, and I struggled. I told you the QB spot is not great this week on the main slate, so I struggled with my super flex spot. I did want to get a quarterback in there. I went with Anthony Brown here. I'm playing the over-under, and I'm playing the idea that Oregon laid out a vanilla offense last week against Fresno, because if you look at the fourth quarter when they needed to get it done, you saw Anthony Brown make that run there, executed that read option well, and broke off that rushing touchdown. So I'm hoping we go down that way. Fellas, at least $400 on the table. I think this lineup is going to change throughout the week, but hopefully you'll be able to at least pick some pieces out of it for how you want to plug and play your DK slate this week. John, take us home with your fantastic four here.
So it's very interesting because Matt and I identified both of the same wide receiver cores, the Buckeyes and the Nittany Lions. Now, I have a pretty much basic strategy in these wide open dynamic offenses like Ohio State. In my DFS lineup, I'm taking the cheaper of the two pieces. Garrett Wilson is significantly less expensive, from $7,200 to $5,900. That's $1,300 on this slate. I'm going with Wilson in my fantastic four. Now, Keandre Lambert-Smith, I saw him at $3,900. I happen to like Parker Washington at $4,000. Either one of them, they're the exact, their numbers are almost identical. And I do think Penn State can light up that Ball State secondary. So I like either one, but I'm putting Parker Washington into mine. Running back, I have one stud who I love. I love Kyren Williams this week. Ladies and gentlemen, Florida State stonewalled the Notre Dame running game. I'm telling you right now, I would be embarrassed to be an offensive lineman on the Fighting Irish, because I'm telling you right now, that offensive line coach is chewing them up with the backside, and there is no tomorrow on the expression of anger at how poorly that Notre Dame offensive line played against Florida State. You think they want Jack Cohn to throw that often? You are stone cold crazy. They want to run the football. They want to dominate the line of scrimmage. You know what that tells me this week? Notre Dame is going to dominate up front. Kyren Williams is going to get over 100 yards rushing. He's going to get his 3 to 5 receptions, and he's going to score twice. I love Kyren Williams. Yes, the quarterbacks are not pretty. I'll let you decide if you want Sean Clifford, C.J. Stroud. That's for our listeners. Anthony Brown is the value here. Game script says fourth quarter, the Ducks are playing from behind, and Anthony Brown can get you 60 yards rushing and a touchdown in garbage time. He's my quarterback. You still have plenty of salary cap remaining to make your position to fill up the lineup. That's my fantastic four.
All right, there you have it. That is week 2 of the Blitz. We appreciate you listening. Make sure you leave us a 5-star review, and we will be back here tomorrow on the NFL Draft Bible Podcast Network with the Debbie Seminar.